The Confederation diplomatic vessel departed Earth's orbital station precisely 6 hours after it had arrived, leaving behind a bewildered Ambassador Krolix and an atmosphere thick with unprecedented diplomatic confusion. The human delegation had not only rejected what the Confederation considered a generous offer, but had done so without presenting a counterproposal. In 12,000 years of galactic diplomacy, no species had ever simply declined to negotiate. Back on the flagship, Krelix slumped in his private chamber, compound eyes dimming with exhaustion as he composed his report to the Council. How could he explain that the humans had laughed? That Dr. Reyes had actually invited him to stay for what she called coffee and a proper chat after dismissing the official treaty. Most concerning of all, how could he convey that the humans didn't seem frightened by the Confederation at all? Ambassador, his aide Trellix chirped through the communication panel. Central Command requests your analysis of human defensive capabilities. Krillix paused, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. The humans had shown him nothing of their military. Instead, Dr. Rice had offered a tour of a children's education facility, a food production center, and something called a community garden. None of these seemed strategically significant, yet the humans had presented them with obvious pride. Tell Command that analysis is inconclusive, he finally responded. The humans displayed no conventional defensive systems for assessment. What he couldn't articulate was the strange unease that had settled in his thorax during the Earth visit. The humans moved with a peculiar confidence, as if they possessed some knowledge or advantage invisible to Confederation sensors. Most species, upon first contact with the vastly superior Confederation, displayed either awe or terror. The humans had shown neither, only a disconcerting level of comfort with their position in the galaxy. Dr. Reyes' parting words echoed in his memory. Ambassador Krelix, we appreciate your visit, but perhaps next time the Confederation could send someone authorized to discuss actual cooperation instead of thinly disguised subjugation. We'd be delighted to show you how mutually beneficial relationships work. The communication panel chimed again. Central Command acknowledges your report, Trellix announced. The Council is convening an emergency session to discuss the human response. Your presence is required. Krellix felt his exoskeleton tighten with stress. The Council would demand answers he didn't have. They would expect recommendations he couldn't confidently provide. Most of all, they would want an explanation for why these primitives from a backwater solar system hadn't reacted according to any established first contact protocol. As he prepared for the Council meeting, Krellix reviewed the limited data collected during the brief visit. One detail caught his attention. Earth's information networks had shown a curious spike in activity during the exact moments when the treaty terms were being presented, almost as if. His central eye widened as realization struck. The humans had broadcast the entire negotiation globally, in real time. While he had been presenting terms to a small delegation, the entire species had been watching, analyzing, and likely reaching that collective consensus that had resulted in such casual rejection. The Confederation always negotiated with planetary leadership in carefully controlled privacy. The humans had transformed a standard diplomatic procedure into a public spectacle. What kind of species operated with such transparency? And more importantly, what kind of species could afford to? As the flagship accelerated toward Confederation space, Krellix found himself doing something unprecedented in his diplomatic career. He began to worry that perhaps the Confederation had severely misjudged the situation. Grand Vizier Thombach's crest deflated as he strode from the United Nations chamber, his aides scurrying to keep pace with his agitated movements. The human announcement of independent FTL technology had transformed his carefully orchestrated ultimatum into a diplomatic embarrassment. Moreover, the casual way the Kenyan representative had offered to carry messages to Confederation colonies carried an unmistakable subtext. Humans were already preparing to bypass the Confederation entirely. Impossible, he muttered as his security detail cleared a path to his shuttle. Their technological development timeline cannot have advanced this quickly. It must be a bluff. His senior analyst, Vrista, dared to speak. The preliminary scans of their information networks show multiple corporations reporting successful tests. Vizier. Their financial systems are responding as if the technology is genuine. Then they have stolen it. Fombach snapped. Dispatch intelligence teams to investigate which of our worlds leaked the FTL formulations. Vrista hesitated. The human patents suggest a completely different approach to faster-than-light travel. Vizier. Their method utilizes principles our scientists considered theoretically sound but practically unworkable. It appears they've solved implementation problems our researchers abandoned 3 centuries ago. The shuttle lifted off, providing a panoramic view of the sprawling human megacity below. Fombach stared at the primitive skyline, his mind racing to recalculate the Confederation's leverage. The FTL monopoly had been their primary economic control mechanism for millennia. Without it, dozens of member worlds might reconsider their tributary status. "Connect me to the Science Directorate," he ordered. "I want our top researchers to analyze these human patents immediately." As the communication link established, his personal assistant handed him an urgent message from Confederation intelligence. He scanned it quickly, his crest flattening completely against his skull, a sign of extreme distress in his species. "Cancel that connection," he barked. "Route me directly to the High Council. Emergency protocol." The humans hadn't just announced FTL technology. According to intelligence reports, 3 human vessels had already reached the Proxima trading hub. Not diplomatic ships or military vessels, but ordinary commercial freighters loaded with trade goods. They had arrived, registered properly with local authorities, paid standard docking fees, and begun negotiating with local merchants, all without any fanfare or special treatment. Most concerning of all, they had brought commodities specifically chosen to address critical shortages in the sector: medical supplies, rare earth elements, and specialized agricultural inputs that Confederation supply chains had failed to deliver for several cycles. They were selling at prices 30% below Confederation-approved rates, but still maintaining profitable margins, suggesting the humans had more efficient production methods as well. When the Council connection finally established, Fombach found himself facing not just the expected emergency committee, but the full Confederation leadership. "Explain this failure," demanded Supreme Chancellor Vrax, not bothering with formal protocols. Fombach struggled to maintain composure. "Chancellor, the situation is more complex than anticipated. The humans appear to have. They appear to have made fools of us," interrupted Councillor Zeth of the Commerce Division. "While you were delivering threats, they were already establishing trade relationships that undermine our entire economic framework." "A temporary setback," Fombach insisted, "once we implement the full isolation protocol." "Isolation?" Councillor Zeth laughed bitterly. "The Proxima Sector Governor just informed me that 17 critical medical centers have already placed substantial orders with human suppliers. Are you suggesting we block delivery of life-saving medications to our own worlds?" The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Confederation's economic leverage had been built on carefully managed scarcity and controlled distribution networks. The humans had identified those vulnerabilities and targeted them with almost surgical precision. "Perhaps," ventured an elderly counselor rarely known to speak, "we should consider a different approach to these humans, one that acknowledges their apparent strengths rather than presuming weakness." Supreme Chancellor Vrax silenced the chamber with a gesture. "Different approaches can be explored. For now, Vizier Fombach, you will return to Earth immediately with revised terms. And this time, do try not to give them additional leverage before you even begin negotiations." Zara Vex maintained perfect composure until she reached the privacy of her diplomatic shuttle. Once the hatch sealed behind her, she slumped against the bulkhead, her chromatic skin flushing a deep indigo of distress. The proposed scientific exchange had been a catastrophic miscalculation, and now she had to explain to the Confederation Council how humans had not only rejected their offer, but had completely inverted the power dynamic. "Ambassador," her pilot called from the cockpit, We've received a data packet from the human delegation. They're requesting permission to transmit it to our vessel. Vex straightened, forcing her skin back to the neutral green of professional diplomacy. Analyze for security threats first, she ordered. Standard protocol when receiving alien data, though something told her the precaution was unnecessary. These humans seemed frustratingly ethical. The security scan completed in moments. No threats detected, Ambassador. It appears to be scientific data. Substantial scientific data. Display summary, Vex commanded, moving to the central holoprojector. The display illuminated with thousands of research files, each neatly categorized and annotated. Quantum computing advancements, gravitational manipulation theories, medical breakthroughs, agricultural innovations. The humans had sent their complete scientific database as a gesture of good faith. A note from Dr. Chen accompanied the transmission. Consider this a preview of what genuine cooperation might accomplish. No strings attached. Vex felt a sensation she had never experienced in her 67 cycles of diplomatic service. She felt shame. The Confederation's planned exchange had been manipulative by design, offering outdated technology in exchange for cutting-edge human innovations. The humans had recognized this immediately and responded not with anger or suspicion, but with openness that made the Confederation's approach seem petty and underhanded. Accept the transmission, she said finally, and prepare a secure channel to the Science Directorate. Priority Alpha. While the connection established, Vex reviewed the human proposal again. Their terms were simple to the point of naivety. Open sharing of all scientific and technological advancements for mutual benefit. No proprietary restrictions, no political leverage, no tiered access based on status. The concept violated every principle of the Confederation's knowledge economy, where information was currency and technological advantages secured political dominance. Ambassador Vex, the stern visage of Science Director Coldtar, appeared on the communication screen. Your mission report is overdue. Has the human delegation accepted our terms? Director, Vex began carefully. The situation has evolved in an unexpected direction. The humans have counter-offered with their own proposal for scientific exchange. They've already transmitted their complete research database as a demonstration of good faith. Coldtar's eyes narrowed. A primitive deception, surely. They cannot possibly possess knowledge worth. With respect, Director, Vex interrupted, a career-endangering breach of protocol. I've had our specialists conduct a preliminary analysis. Their quantum computing research alone is approximately 3 centuries ahead of our most advanced work. Their medical technology includes cures for 17 conditions our physicians consider untreatable. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. More concerning, Vex continued, they've already transmitted similar offers to 16 member worlds, bypassing Central Confederation authority. 13 have already responded favorably. Coldtar's expression hardened. Which worlds? Primarily those in the outer sectors. Worlds that have historically received limited access to Confederation scientific advancements due to their political status. The unspoken reality hung between them. The Confederation had always used knowledge as a tool of control, restricting access to advanced technology based on loyalty and tribute. The humans were offering an alternative that threatened to unravel that entire system. What do you recommend, Ambassador? Coldtar asked finally. Vex took a calculated risk. I believe we should accept their terms, Director. Not because they are favorable to us, but because refusal at this point would only accelerate the fragmentation that has already begun. At least this way, the Confederation maintains a position in the new paradigm. I will consult with the Council, Coldtar replied stiffly. In the meantime, stall the humans. Tell them we are considering their generous offer. As the connection terminated, Vex gazed at the data streaming through her ship's systems, human knowledge flowing freely, without the barriers and restrictions her civilization had always taken for granted. She couldn't help but wonder if, perhaps the humans' approach wasn't naive after all, but rather a sophistication the Confederation had never achieved. Admiral Zoreth Carr sat motionless in his private quarters aboard the inevitable Dominion, reviewing the sensor data for the 12th time. 23,842 vessels. That was the final count of the human response fleet that had surrounded his military demonstration. Analysis confirmed what seemed impossible. They were indeed civilian craft, ranging from personal transport pods to industrial haulers, with not a dedicated warship among them. Admiral. His executive officer's voice came through the communication system. The High Command is requesting your tactical assessment. They'd scheduled an emergency strategy session in 2 hours. Carr sighed heavily. Inform them I'll transmit my report within the hour. What could he possibly tell them? That humans had revealed a capability no military strategist in the Confederation had ever considered. That a species could rapidly mobilize its entire civilian infrastructure into a coordinated defensive response. The implications were staggering. The Confederation's military doctrine was built on the assumption that military and civilian sectors were separate, with clear chains of command, specialized equipment, and rigid protocols. The human response suggested a society where those boundaries were far more fluid, where ordinary citizens could transform into a defense force with minimal notice. A notification chimed, interrupting his thoughts. Intelligence had completed their analysis of intercepted human communications during the incident. Carr opened the report and felt his blood run cold as he read. The civilian armada had assembled in response to a simple social media message. The Confederation is doing a military exercise near Mars. Anyone with a space-worthy vessel want to go watch. No emergency protocols, no government directives, no military requisitioning. Just citizens deciding collectively to show up. More disturbing still, the perfect formation, the aspect that had most impressed and unsettled his military observers, had been coordinated through a hastily modified traffic management app. The same software humans used to navigate their daily commutes had been repurposed within minutes to coordinate a response to a potential threat. Carr brought up the visuals again, focusing on individual vessels. Many displayed corporate logos or personal customizations. Some carried families. A few appeared to have launched with refreshments and viewing equipment, as if attending a sporting event. Yet together, they had executed a maneuver that would have earned commendations in any Confederation fleet exercise. Admiral. His strategic analyst entered after a respectful chime. I've completed the capability assessment you requested. And? Carr prompted, though he already suspected the answer. If we extrapolate from what we observed, sir, and assume similar response rates across their solar system, the humans could potentially mobilize over 300,000 vessels within 2 hours of a full-scale alert. None of which are actual warships, Carr noted. No, sir, but our simulations suggest they wouldn't need to be. The analyst placed a datapad on Carr's desk. Even unarmed, such numbers could overwhelm our targeting systems, disrupt our formations, and complicate any military operation beyond sustainable parameters. And if they were armed? Carr asked quietly. Sir, if even 10% of those civilian vessels carried weapons comparable to our light frigates. The analyst left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. Carr dismissed the analyst and turned to the viewport, staring at the distant blue marble of Earth. The Confederation had expected to intimidate a primitive world with an overwhelming show of force. Instead, they had provoked a demonstration that revealed more about human capabilities than humans had learned about Confederation ones. He began composing his report to High Command, choosing his words with extreme care. The humans hadn't just responded to a threat. They had communicated something profound about their society and its structure. The challenge wasn't merely military but cultural. The Confederation's compartmentalized, hierarchical approach to power was being confronted by something far more adaptive and resilient. As he completed his assessment, Carr added a personal recommendation, one that might end his career, but which his professional integrity demanded. Based on observed capabilities and response patterns, standard military pressure tactics against Earth are not advised. Such approaches appear likely to provoke precisely the unified response they are intended to prevent. Cultural envoy Illyria Voss sat in her temporary quarters at the Earth Diplomatic Center, replaying the recording of the global broadcast event. Each viewing only deepened her professional mortification. The image of Yum Yo Mingzhu confidently countering the Confederation's proposal with a disarmingly reasonable alternative had already become what humans called a viral sensation across their information networks. Envoy Voss, her cultural attaché, Brill, appeared at the doorway. Earth's Education Directorate has delivered their formal response to our cultural exchange proposal. Voss accepted the tablet with resignation. Let me guess. They've expanded on the schoolgirl's counteroffer. It's quite comprehensive, Brill admitted. The document detailed an expansive program to host Confederation citizens of all member worlds on Earth. Educational institutions across the planet had enthusiastically volunteered facilities and resources. Thousands of human families had registered to host visitors in their homes. Cultural centers had developed specialized programs to introduce Confederation species to human art, music, cuisine, and social practices. Most troubling of all, the humans had already begun developing adaptive accommodations for different Confederation physiologies. Atmosphere regulators for species with unique breathing requirements, specialized dietary provisions for exotic metabolisms, and modified furniture for non-humanoid body structures. They've been planning this for months, Voss realized. They anticipated our hostage strategy before we even arrived. It appears so, Brill agreed, and our intelligence suggests the program is gaining enthusiastic support from numerous member worlds. The delegation from Proxima VI has already submitted 800 applications. Voss set down the tablet, her carefully manicured claws tapping restlessly against her knee. Have our analysts determined how this Mingzhu child was selected to respond? Was she a governmental operative, a specially trained diplomatic asset? Brill's expression conveyed his discomfort. According to our investigation, she was genuinely the winner of a global essay contest. Her submission was titled, Beyond Hierarchy, Alternative Models for Interspecies Relations. It appears the humans allowed a genuine youth competition to determine their diplomatic response. Impossible, Voss muttered. No functioning government would entrust such a critical interaction to random chance and a teenager. Cultural intelligence has been analyzing this approach, Brill offered hesitantly. They believe it may reflect fundamental human values. Their historical records indicate many instances where they deliberately elevated young voices in important discussions, particularly regarding future-oriented policies. Voss's communicator chimed with the distinctive tone of a priority message from Central Command. Supreme Chancellor Vrax's face appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. Envoy Voss, he began without preamble. The Council has reviewed your situation. We find ourselves in a complicated position. Refusing the human counteroffer would make the Confederation appear unreasonable to member worlds who have already expressed enthusiasm for the program. Chancellor, if I might recommend a strategic retreat. That option is no longer available. Vrax interrupted. We have received formal requests from 47 member worlds to accept the human proposal. The Education Guild has issued a statement supporting the initiative as potentially revolutionary for interspecies understanding. Voss struggled to maintain her diplomatic composure. What are my instructions, Chancellor? You will accept their counteroffer, Vrax stated flatly, but you will negotiate for Confederation oversight of all participating citizens. Frame it as concern for their well-being and cultural sensitivity. After the communication ended, Voss stared out the window at the bustling human city beyond. Children played in a nearby park, their laughter carrying through the transparent barrier. Families moved freely, unburdened by the caste markings and status indicators that define Confederation society. Teachers led groups of students through interactive lessons under open skies. For the first time in her distinguished career, Voss considered a troubling possibility. Perhaps the Confederation's hierarchical model wasn't the inevitable pinnacle of civilization that she had always believed. Perhaps these humans, with their chaotic, participatory systems, and their willingness to elevate even children's voices, had developed something different. Not necessarily better, she hastily corrected herself, but certainly more adaptive than anticipated. The Confederation had attempted to secure high-status hostages and had instead found itself drawn into a massive cultural exchange program that would expose thousands of its citizens to human ideals and practices. The implications were both subtle and profound. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered a diplomatic gambit. They had transformed it into an opportunity to showcase their society to the galaxy. Voss began drafting her acceptance of the human proposal, wondering how many other Confederation envoys were experiencing similar reversals across their diplomatic initiatives with Earth. Economic Commissioner Drell Hammerthumb's office on the Confederation's Central Market Station had once commanded spectacular views of thousands of trading vessels moving through the galaxy's busiest commercial hub. Now, he kept the viewport shields closed, unable to bear the visible evidence of declining traffic as more worlds diverted their commerce to alternative routes pioneered by human merchants. Commissioner, his senior economic analyst, entered after the required triple chime of respect. The quarterly trade report is complete. Hammerthumb gestured irritably for the tablet. Let's have it then. How bad? Overall commerce through Confederation-controlled hubs has declined 27%, the analyst reported, 42% in the outer sectors. And the boycott effectiveness metrics. The analyst hesitated. Direct human Confederation trade has indeed been reduced to nearly zero as intended. But, Hammerthumb prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification. But proxy trading through non-Confederation intermediaries has increased dramatically. Our estimates suggest human goods are reaching approximately 70% of member worlds through indirect channels. Moreover, overall human export volume has actually increased by 34% since the boycott began. Hammerthumb slammed his fist against his desk, the characteristic gesture that had earned him his name. How is this possible? Their trade networks should have collapsed without access to our established routes and markets. Sir, human trade methodology appears fundamentally different from our model, the analyst explained. Rather than establishing centralized control points and regulated pathways, they've developed what they call a distributed resilient network. Their merchants operate with considerable autonomy, rapidly adapting to local conditions and forming direct relationships with planetary markets. The commissioner scrolled through the data, his expression darkening with each swipe. The boycott had been designed according to classical Confederation economic doctrine. Isolate the target economy from established markets, control access to essential trade routes, and leverage the resulting hardship to force compliance. It had worked flawlessly for 12,000 years against countless worlds. Yet somehow, the humans had treated these formidable barriers as mere inconveniences, developing workarounds with disturbing speed and effectiveness. Commissioner, the analyst continued, there's something else you should see. He adjusted the display to show a detailed breakdown of human trade goods. They appear to be specifically targeting sectors where Confederation supply chains have shown inefficiencies or shortages. Hammerthumb studied the analysis with growing alarm. Medical supplies to worlds suffering from pandemic outbreaks. Agricultural inputs to regions experiencing crop failures. Educational materials to underdeveloped sectors. Essential components to manufacturing centers experiencing supply disruptions. In each case, the humans provided exactly what was most desperately needed, at precisely the moment of greatest vulnerability. The political implications were impossible to ignore. They were systematically identifying and addressing the Confederation's economic failures, building goodwill and dependency relationships with member worlds. And what of their own economy? Hammerthumb asked. Surely they must be facing internal challenges without access to our resources. The analyst shifted uncomfortably. Human domestic production has actually increased across all sectors. They appear to have invested significantly in manufacturing automation and resource development within their own system. Some economists suggest they may have been preparing for this confrontation for some time. A priority communication alert interrupted their discussion. The Supreme Chancellor's office was requesting an immediate update on the boycott's effectiveness. Hammerthumb dismissed the analyst and composed himself before accepting the connection. "Chancellor," he began, preparing to deliver the disappointing news. "Save your explanations." Chancellor Vrax cut him off. "I've received the report. The boycott has failed. Worse, it has accelerated the very fragmentation we sought to prevent." Hammerthumb had no response. The evidence was irrefutable. "I've just concluded a most uncomfortable conversation with the governor of New Rigel," Vrax continued. "They formally requested exemption from the boycott due to critical humanitarian needs. 17 other worlds have submitted similar petitions. Perhaps if we offer targeted concessions to those worlds," Hammerthumb began. "It's too late for half measures," Vrax interrupted. "The Medical Guild has publicly criticized our restrictions on human pharmaceuticals. The Agricultural Consortium has issued a formal complaint about disrupted food security. Even the merchant houses are questioning the wisdom of maintaining barriers that their competitors are eagerly circumventing." Hammerthumb realized with a sinking feeling that the boycott had achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Rather than isolating humans, it had highlighted the Confederation's own systemic weaknesses and dependencies. Rather than demonstrating Confederation power, it had revealed its limitations. "Your recommendations, Commissioner?" Vrax asked, though his tone suggested little faith in any answer Hammerthumb might provide. "We must adapt," Hammerthumb said finally. "Perhaps consider a gradual relaxation of restrictions, framed as a gesture of goodwill rather than a retreat." Even as he spoke, he knew the damage was done. The humans hadn't just survived the boycott. They had thrived, establishing new trade patterns that would persist long after the restrictions were lifted. The Confederation had deployed its economic weapon only to discover that the humans had already rendered it obsolete. The Grand Council chamber had fallen into a stunned silence following Ambassador Lucia Okonkwo's presentation. The holographic display still illuminated the cavernous space, thousands of points of light representing human connections throughout the galaxy. Supreme Chancellor Vrax stood motionless at the podium, his carefully prepared threats suddenly rendered hollow by the reality before him. "This is manipulation," he finally declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "These alleged partnerships cannot possibly be as extensive or successful as you claim." Ambassador Okonkwo's expression remained composed. "The data speaks for itself, Chancellor. We've transmitted the full documentation to all member worlds for independent verification. But perhaps you prefer to hear directly from your own citizens." She gestured gracefully, and the holographic display shifted to a communications interface. The lined face of an elderly alien appeared. "Administrator Kelm of the Proxima IV Medical Research Consortium." "Honorable Council," the administrator began, his translated voice carrying the weight of authority earned through centuries of service. "I can confirm that our partnership with Earth scientists has yielded remarkable results. 3 previously untreatable conditions now have effective therapies, developed in just 8 months of collaboration. Our research output has increased by 300% since adopting human open research methodologies." Before Vrax could respond, the display shifted again. A representative from the Tav City Mining Collective appeared, followed by cultural preservationists from New Rigel, agricultural specialists from the Outer Rim worlds, and dozens more. Each testified to specific benefits from their direct collaborations with humans, partnerships formed outside Confederation protocols and oversight. The chamber's atmosphere shifted palpably as more testimony accumulated. Representatives from smaller worlds leaned forward with growing interest. Delegates from the powerful core worlds exchanged troubled glances. The carefully maintained power balance of 12 millennia was visibly fracturing. "Enough of this spectacle," Vrax declared, attempting to regain control. "The Confederation speaks with one voice. These unauthorized arrangements undermine the very foundation of our galactic order." "With respect, Chancellor," Ambassador Okonkwo responded, "that foundation appears to have been built on restricted access to knowledge, controlled distribution of resources, and artificial scarcity. We've simply offered an alternative model based on open collaboration and mutual benefit. A delegate from one of the Outer Rim worlds, usually silent during council proceedings, unexpectedly activated his speaking privileges. Chancellor, my world has suffered resource shortages for 3 centuries despite our loyal tribute. Human merchants arrived 6 months ago with fair trade terms and no political demands. Why should we reject their friendship to maintain a system that has consistently failed us? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Other representatives from traditionally marginalized worlds began signaling their desire to speak, an unprecedented development in council history. Vrax silenced the chamber with an authoritative gesture. This session is suspended pending further deliberation. All delegates will return to their assigned quarters until summoned. He turned his cold gaze to Ambassador Okonkwo. And you will remain on the station until the council determines an appropriate response to this provocation. As the chamber emptied, Okonkwo found herself approached by Zal Volz, the venerable representative of the Historians Guild, one of the few Confederation institutions with genuine independence from political control. A most impressive display, Ambassador, the ancient alien remarked quietly. Though perhaps not in the way you intended. How so? Okonkwo inquired. You have demonstrated what my guild has long suspected but never confirmed, Voss replied. The Confederation was never truly about mutual protection or shared advancement. It was an elaborate system for concentrating power and resources among the privileged few. His multifaceted eyes studied her with ancient wisdom. The question is whether you humans recognize this by analytical brilliance or simply stumbled upon it through your peculiar approach to interspecies relations. Perhaps a bit of both, Okonkwo admitted. We observed the contradictions between the Confederation's stated principles and its actual practices. The rest was simply offering genuine cooperation instead of hierarchical control. In her secure quarters later that evening, Okonkwo received an encrypted communication from Earth Command. Operation Friendship progressing ahead of schedule, it reported. 83% of member worlds have established direct diplomatic channels outside Confederation oversight. Estimated timeline to formal restructuring. 3 cycles. Okonkwo closed the communication and gazed out at the stars visible from her viewport. The Confederation had expected to deliver an ultimatum forcing Earth to submit or face destruction. Instead, they found themselves confronting a profound choice about their own future: adapt to a more equitable model of galactic cooperation, or watch their 12,000-year-old power structure dissolve from within. The strategy had never been about rejecting peace. It had been about redefining it, transforming an oppressive system not through military confrontation, but through offering a better alternative. The thousands of connections humans had built throughout the galaxy weren't just diplomatic relationships or trade agreements. They were the foundation of a new paradigm, one that distributed benefits rather than concentrating them. As debates raged through the Confederation leadership quarters, Okonkwo knew the outcome was already determined. The humans hadn't conquered the galaxy, they had befriended it, one world at a time. And in doing so, they had changed everything. Former Supreme Chancellor Vrax stood on the observation platform overlooking the inaugural ceremony of the Galactic Cooperative. The vast assembly hall, once the exclusive domain of Confederation leadership, now hummed with the diverse energy of representatives from over 3,000 worlds seated as equals. The hierarchical tiers that had once physically manifested the Confederation's power structure had been replaced with a circular arrangement where no delegation held positional superiority. It is still difficult to believe, remarked Zal Volz, the ancient historian who had unexpectedly become Vrax's only regular companion in recent weeks. 12,000 years of established order, transformed in mere cycles. Vrax's posture remained rigidly formal despite his diminished status. Transformed or destroyed. This chaotic arrangement cannot possibly function effectively. Without clear authority and established protocols, how will any decisions be made? Perhaps watch and learn, Vo suggested mildly, gesturing toward the central platform where the opening proceedings had begun. Instead of the elaborate rituals and lengthy ceremonial speeches that had characterized Confederation gatherings, the cooperative session began with something unprecedented: an open forum where delegations of all sizes presented their most pressing concerns and priorities. Advanced technological solutions from developed worlds were immediately connected with resource needs from developing regions. Agricultural specialists from agrarian planets were linked with research teams working on ecosystem restoration. Cultural preservation experts found unexpected synergies with educational initiatives. Problems that would have taken years to navigate through Confederation bureaucracy were being addressed in real time through direct collaboration. Resources that would have been hoarded or leveraged for political advantage were being shared based on greatest need and most effective application. Fascinating, Vos murmured. The humans have essentially extended their internal social dynamics to an interplanetary scale. No central authority dictating solutions, but rather a facilitated network of direct connections based on complementary needs and capabilities. Vrax watched with growing discomfort as species that had been bitter rivals under Confederation rule now engaged in productive dialogue. Worlds that had struggled for centuries under resource quotas were forming direct partnerships with technology providers. The entire galactic power dynamic had been fundamentally restructured, not through violent revolution, but through a simple yet radical alternative approach to cooperation. Chancellor Vrax, a voice interrupted his observations. Dr. Elena Reyes, the same human who had laughed at his original peace offer years ago, now stood beside him. Thank you for accepting our invitation to witness today's proceedings. Former Chancellor, Vrax corrected stiffly, and I had little choice in the matter. My presence was strongly encouraged by the Transition Authority. Dr. Reyes smiled with genuine warmth. Actually, your presence was requested by numerous delegations who value your historical perspective, including Earth's. She extended a data tablet. We would like to formally invite you to lead the Historical Context Advisory Group. Your experience and understanding of previous governance models would be invaluable as we navigate this transition. Vrax stared at the invitation in confusion. You want me to advise the very organization that displaced my authority? We don't see it as displacement, Reyes explained. We see it as evolution. The Confederation structures served the galaxy for millennia, and many of its principles remain valuable. What we're building isn't a rejection of that history, but its natural next phase, retaining what worked while addressing what didn't. The former chancellor studied the human carefully. I once considered your species dangerously naive. Now I wonder if you are perhaps dangerously brilliant. You dismantled 12,000 years of established order without firing a single shot. You reorganized the entire galactic power structure while making it appear to be everyone's idea but your own. Reyes laughed, that same disturbing human sound that had so confused Vrax years ago. That's the secret you never quite understood about us. We didn't need to make it our idea because it genuinely wasn't. The principles of the cooperative existed in countless worlds throughout the galaxy. They were simply suppressed by Confederation hierarchy. All we did was create space for those voices to emerge and connect. Below them, the assembly had organized into working groups addressing everything from interspecies medical protocols to sustainable resource management across diverse ecosystems. The energy in the chamber was palpable, not the careful deference of Confederation proceedings, but the vibrant engagement of genuine collaboration. The humans never rejected peace, Vos observed quietly. They merely rejected a definition of peace that required submission to external authority. Vrax considered this as he watched the proceedings continue. After a lifetime in hierarchical governance, the concept seemed almost incomprehensible: organization without centralized control, cooperation without enforced compliance, advancement without competitive advantage. And if I decline your advisory position? He asked finally. Then we thank you for your consideration and wish you well. Reyes replied simply. The invitation remains open should you change your mind. As she departed to rejoin the Earth delegation, Vrax found himself contemplating a future he had never imagined possible. The humans hadn't conquered the galaxy or destroyed the Confederation through force. They had simply introduced an alternative that proved more compelling to its member worlds. The truly revolutionary aspect wasn't their technology or their strategy, but something far more fundamental. They had reimagined the very nature of peace itself, transforming it from imposed order to collaborative opportunity. And in doing so, they had changed the course of galactic history not through rejection, but through offering something better. Perhaps, Vrax murmured to himself as he watched the vibrant proceedings below, I still have something to learn after all.